All right, so I've already been introduced, but I got the internship with the Coastal Bird Stewardship and Outreach, working for the Siuslaw National Forest as a field ranger, doing interpretive work involved in education and outreach. So before I get there, I just want to showcase my workplace because I think it's gorgeous. This is the top of Cape Perpetua. It's about 803 feet above sea level. And this was my view on almost every Thursday or so. And it's gorgeous. Although I typically work down at the visitor center, which you can actually see here. So definitely recommend checking this place out if you have the chance. Now, so my current responsibilities, what I've been doing this whole summer. Well, I've been leading some guided hikes. I've been doing campground programs, and then there have been some events such as Smokey's birthday. His 80th birthday recently happened. And I've also had some experience in field work, but I've mostly done tabling. And this is a picture of one of our tabling topics. So these are just some pictures of like my guided hike and like just some events that we've done. So this is a board that I did, kind of focus on my guided hike. I decided to take the idea of like kind of appreciating the small things. So I find that like a lot of smaller critters, the insects, the snakes, the amphibians, I find that they're underappreciated by a lot of people. So I decided to create the program or the guided hike, Big World, Small Eyes, so then people could kind of see these animals, see how they interact with the environment, and appreciate them more. And then this is actually one of the guys here. It's a snail-eating carabid, a ground beetle, and I highly recommend learning about them. And then below it is a picture of one of our recent events where I got to work with some elementary students while dissecting owl pellets. Here's another picture showcasing some of the field work that I've done. The first picture in the top right corner, or I suppose left corner from your guys' perspective, was from when I got to do a bird survey. This was like my first week of actual work at my internship, and it involved getting up at 2 a.m. in the morning to drive out to conduct bird surveys at 3:50 a.m. in the morning for 2 hours. So you can see here we were craning our necks at the sky, watching for marbled murrelets. And then below, or all the surrounding pictures, were from a recent fish survey where we got to count stickleback, coho salmon, rough-skinned newts, all sorts of animals as we relocated them for future salmon conservation projects. Now, the brunt of what I did was tabling. And so some of our tabling topics focused on endangered and threatened species, such as the coho salmon and the marbled murrelet. And then we also did a mammals of the forest identification, which you can see is this table here. We placed out tracks, spurs, and skulls of about 5 mammals found in the Siuslaw National Forest, and we had visitors come up and guess them. And then our other topic, although not done at Cape Perpetua, was our dunes formation, dunes restoration, and the western snowy plover. This topic took place at the Dunes State Use Recreational Area in the Oregon Dunes, so up near Florence, and we cover the topics I listed here. And in the picture to the left, you can see us. We actually have had a couple tabling events at the aquarium. So here's like one of the big birds, huge part of my internship, the marbled murrelet. So what are they? Well, they're a pretty weird seabird. So this seabird is a North Pacific seabird, and they have a black, white, and gray plumage or feathers when they're not breeding, and it changes into more of a brown foresty color when they are breeding. And that's because, unlike most seabirds that prefer to nest on the rocky shores or the sandy beaches of the Oregon coast, these birds like to nest in the forest. So they actually require old growth forests, and they can travel up to 50 miles inland to find a nest. And they look for these big mossy branches so that they can kind of crash land to lay their one egg. So they lay about 1 egg per nesting season. If this egg fails, then that is the end of their season until next year. And this egg is about 33% of their body weight. So these are small seabirds, about the size of 2 of your hands put together. And so that one egg is really detrimental to their survival. And because of the size, they can only produce that one egg. And so these birds are endangered in Oregon, and the primary reason is due to habitat loss, because as I mentioned before, they do require old growth forests. But unfortunately, in the past couple hundred years, we have lost a lot of that. So if you don't know, for a tree or a forest to really achieve old growth status, it requires up to 200 years. So kind of protecting their habitat is like the best we can do. We can't really restore much of it at this moment. So their other issue is predation, and that's the one that we really like to tackle on when we're working at Cape Perpetua. And you can kind of see in the pictures here, the top one is what they look like when they're not breeding, and the bottom image is what they look like when they are breeding. So our other bird that we talk about is western snowy plover. And so what is this bird? Well, they're a Pacific Coast shorebird. And so these guys have a brown and white sandy plumage when they're not breeding, and the males and females are indistinguishable from one another. And then when they are breeding, they have a brown and black plumage on their head and chest with a sandy plumage. And so these guys, they like to nest on the sandy beaches. They are often found out at the dunes. So I recommend going there so you can kind of come across them. And they like to nest between the rack line and the foredune, so the first dune in our long line of dunes. And so if you don't know, the rack line is kind of like where all the shells and like seaweed and waste washes up, and that's where they like to nest because they can perfectly blend in with the environment there. And so these guys, they can lay about 3 eggs per clutch. So unlike the marbled murrelet, they have higher chances of survival in that regard because the female will also leave after laying her eggs to go find another mate while the male actually watches over the eggs and the chicks. And so these guys are threatened in Oregon, and similar to the marbled murrelet, it is primarily due to loss of habitat. So if you guys don't know, the dunes in recent years have been taken over by invasive plants such as European beach grass that was planted in the 30s. And this has led, it was first planted to stabilize the dunes and to prevent sand from blowing inland. And unfortunately, it worked too well because now the dunes are unable to complete their natural movement. And because of that, a lot of vegetation has started growing there, including the European beach grass, as well as some native plants to Oregon that are now finding that sandy habitat suitable because it's been stabilized. But of course, there's only so much we could do to tackle that, such as prescribe burns and pulls. So we also tackle the topic of predation with these birds. So the U.S. Forest Service message, or Cape Perpetua's message that we like to talk about, is leave no trace and clean camp ranger. Both very similar messages, and they have about 7 principles that convey the importance of minimizing human impact in nature. And so the messages are used to protect marbled murrelets and western snowy plovers, and to get people to be more mindful about local flora and fauna. So what's the problem? I would say it's not necessarily a problem, but something that I've observed. So all of our tabling topics are very specific to Cape Perpetua and the Oregon dunes, which is great. It's good that they're integral information to Oregon. However, a lot of our visitors are out of state and out of the country. So typically the information that we tell them regarding, our leave no trace and clean camp ranger principles are going to be associated or tied to our endangered and threatened species. And it's not really something that they're going to carry with them. They might think the information is cool, but they probably won't apply it to the animals that are around them where they come from. So I'm thinking like visitors might not retain this information. So I wanted to create a more generalized topic that's still connected to the forest and the dunes, while also kind of giving people something to think about when they go home. So what kind of inspired this project was outdoor recreation has grown in recent years in the US. Following the pandemic, a lot of people have taken to going outside due to social distancing. And then it's also been predicted that with climate change happening, as the temperatures get warmer, more people are going to be outside because there is generally a higher population of people that engage in outdoor recreation when it's warmer weather. And of course, with this, there's going to be more food and general waste left about. So our endangered and threatened animals are harmed by our impacts, such as the marbled murrelet and the western snowy plover. And my solution was to create a waste awareness tabling topic. So as I mentioned, there's a lack of outdoor environmental consideration, whether it's intentional or not, and people continue to leave food out improperly. They dispose of waste wrongfully, and they intentionally feed animals. And failure to understand our impact has led to issues like increased wildlife and human contact, issues with preventable deaths linked to waste, such as animals getting strangled by plastic and more, malnutrition, and dependency on humans for food. So what I decided to do is I wanted to kind of create a project or a tabling topic focusing on waste awareness using a guessing game and infographics. So I first collected data on decomposition time or breakdown times for select items, things that you commonly find out when you're camping, such as like plastic water bottles, beer bottles, candy wrappers, just anything that is generally wasteful, including food like banana peels. And then I created cards of select items with the decomposition and breakdown times on them. And the goal of that was I wanted to turn it into a guessing game. So I've noticed from our mammals identification game, a lot of people are more engaged when you turn it into a game, and they're more likely to learn and retain that information because it's fun to them. So I created these cards and they have their breakdown times listed on them and they're covered. So then people can kind of take a gander at how long it takes for an item to break down. And then they'll more often than not be shocked by how long it is. And then I also wanted to create some infographics to kind of convey this information better. So I created a clean camp ranger infographic, a food waste infographic, and a general waste infographic. And then I also gathered marbled millet and crow-related items from previous tabling boxes in hopes of using that to kind of better tie in my topic to the Siuslaw National Forest so that it's still connected. And I also utilized coho salmon items to further connect the topic to the forest. So this is the first infographic that I made. It's our Clean Camp Ranger infographic. It has these 7 principles to follow. So when you're out in nature, such as being prepared by planning ahead, you want to stay on the trail and camp responsibly. We don't want to disturb vegetation unnecessarily. We want to pack out what you pack in. So in other words, don't leave your waste behind, take it with you. And then we also don't take what you find. That might kind of fly over people's heads because you think, oh, pretty rock, I want to take it. The issue is that if everyone starts thinking that and everyone starts taking rocks, then soon there's not going to be enough to really sustain the environment there or the ecosystem. And a lot of animals are dependent on these things to survive. And then another is to responsibly use fire, such as you want to douse it with water, stir it, and do a heat check. You never want to cover it with sand or dirt because that can actually insulate the heat and keep it going. And then we want to respect others and be considerate of wildlife. My next infographic is related to food. So I have the slogan, keep wildlife wild, and it's not just food. And I decided to tackle the big 3 issues with animals eating human foods, such as increased human and wildlife interactions. So consider more bears are now entering campsites because they associate humans with food, and they know that where there are humans congregating, there's going to be food. So this can lead to a lot of dangerous interactions, such as people getting harmed, as well as bears dying as a result of this interaction. Another problem is altered animal relationship dynamics. So unfortunately, because of human waste, bears, again, they might be at a campground or they might be at a garbage disposal area, and they will tolerate other bears being around them despite being solitary and territorial animals because they've changed their diet. So now there's no competition for it. And it's also happened with their prey. So they will also tolerate prey being around them, and prey and vice versa can tolerate being around the bear, which is very unnatural behavior for these animals. And then another issue happens to be health issues that stem from human food. So unfortunately, human food lacks the nutrients that a lot of wild animals need to sustain themselves, and that can lead to malnutrition as well as food poisoning because there could be pesticides on the food or just some other illness linked to it. And then wild animals dependent on human food may die from starvation, die from human conflict, move away from their natural habitat and encroach on other territories, and they might also switch their dietary preferences. My last infographic is focused on general waste, and rather than telling people all about how bad waste is for the environment, I instead wanted to make it simple enough for kids to understand too, and I wanted it to be something to get you thinking. It's you might think broken glass left out, that's fine, right? Wrong. If you leave a bottle out in nature and it happens to break, animals can unfortunately walk across it. It can cut off their paws or their feet, and that can actually lead to various illnesses, and it can lead to premature death. And so I also focus on tin can, there can be sharp edges, any form of metal, they can get stuck on it and die. You have straws, it can get lodged in their throats or their stomachs. We have banana peels, which leads to the whole idea of animals associating humans with food. So if you leave that out, or even an apple core, animals will start congregating in those areas, and it can lead to a lot of issues. Fishing line, that is a huge issue for our seabirds and shorebirds, leading to entanglements and death, as well as plastic bags. And so the whole idea is your trash does more harm than you think, even if it's not something as distinct as plastic. So this is just kind of an example of one of the sheets that I use for the guessing game. And a lot of this will be tied with oral information that our interpretive rangers will provide. And so I created this, and each number is covered with a tab. And so featuring a glass bottle, which could take 1 million years to break down. And when I say break down, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more so break down into tiny granules of sand. And then I also provided a candy wrapper for reference too. So unfortunately, due to the time frame of my internship, as well as the fact that mine focuses on outreach and education, I will not get to see the fruits of my labor. So I'm just kind of hoping that the guessing game will increase interpretive interactions. I'm hoping that people will be more engaged by the information. And then I also think it will inspire them to think about how they interact with the environment. And then I'm also hoping it will encourage personal research, such as research involving plastic or like recycling, because you'd be surprised a lot of people aren't aware of what their local recycling policies are and improperly recycle things, such as not like failing to properly wash them out. And then I also want them to learn about Oregon's endangered and threatened animals, as that is part of our responsibility working for the Siuslaw National Forest. And I'm hoping that the information will be something that can be applied to their hometown or like just their wherever they go. So it's something that they can carry with them. And I guess the takeaway is that people will be more aware of their impact regardless of where they're at. So now I'm on to my acknowledgements. I want to thank MACO, or the Marine Coastal Opportunities, for providing me with a chance to do this internship, Seabird Scientific for funding this internship, Oregon State Hatfield for giving me a place to rest while I go to Cape Perpetua every day, and of course, the Siuslaw National Forest, or U.S. Forest Service, for providing me with such a cool opportunity, our state parks, because we did get to do a lot of campground programs working with them, and Oregon Coast Aquarium, because we also got to table there quite a bit, and it was a great opportunity. And then, of course, I want to thank my mentor, Reba Ortiz, for being like such a great help, for really helping me learn and like kind of pushing me to do better, pushing me out of my comfort zone too a lot, which I genuinely appreciate. My whole team of interpretive rangers that I got to work with for making it such a fun experience, as well as Cynthia Leonard for really just like kind of providing me with this opportunity. It's been such a great time. So yeah, thank you guys. And then